And everybody, it's time for the Trump assassination files. Come on down and join us at freedomslips.com, revolution.radio, and join us today. We're streaming around the world on iTunes, talkstreamlive.com, TuneIn, Shoutcast, Winamp, just a few of the streaming services that carry Revolution Radio. So come on down and join us at freedomslips.com. Call in and listen at 518-906-1839 for Studio A. That's 518-906-1839. Or you can go over to the revolution.radio website, freedomslips.com, and join us there live with using one of the mini players. And always remember, we are listener supported and commercial free. We have one break at the bottom of the hour. The rest of the time is for you to get information, and the archives are free. So if you miss anything, always remember, come on over to the archives and download it or listen to it for free at no cost. There are a year's worth of archives for all of the shows here at Revolution Radio available for you, free to listen to. So don't miss out and get the news and information that you should. So good evening, everybody. Tonight we have Gene Douglas. Gene Douglas, a college, I believe he's a college professor in chemistry.
I'm retired now, but yes,
I've been. Go ahead. He's retired. Okay. Tell us a little bit about yourself so they know your background, Gene.
Well, basically, I've been teaching chemistry for most of the last over 30 years, since 1991, college and university level. And basically, I planned to go into industry when I went to grad school, so getting into teaching wasn't really what I had in mind. But basically, I really liked chemistry in high school. I majored in it in college, and then decided to go to grad school to work in industry. And then I ended up getting into teaching and started in 1991. So I basically taught freshmen and sophomores chemistry, general chemistry, intro to chemistry, organic a couple times, as well as some physical science courses. So I've had a wide variety of experience, but basically I have some interesting political history too. So it's kind of related to this thing also, which interests me because I've been involved in Republican politics since I grew up in a very liberal Quaker family, and kind of the black sheep that got out of that. And so basically I became a conservative when I was in college, and then, or way before then, I guess, and then basically got more determined and such like that. And so basically I've been involved in politics as a candidate, as well as on the periphery, following it along because I find it very interesting regarding the games and such like that. But for most of your listeners, you need to understand that in some respects, American politics is a substitution for wars, real wars, like the Civil War.
Absolutely.
And basically, the battles are fought out in Congress as well as for elections. And so what's going on regarding 2016, 2020, et cetera, is not new. It's like JFK stole the election in 1960. So what happened with Trump losing in 2020, basically because the Democrats cheated, that's not new. And they weren't expecting to have to cheat much more than they did in 2016. So they were expecting to win, but Trump won. And so basically that's kind of the situation we're in now. And I feel in some respects, the only way that Republicans can win without cheating is win a large majority. And so it's a situation where basically that's part of why I'm a Republican and not a Democrat, because basically our platform, we stand for something that means a lot to me. And and yet the Democratic platform is obscene. So basically,
obscene. Yeah. The
yeah.
Democrat
So
platform is, well, far obscene. Yeah. I'm a hardcore independent. Um, I felt burned, by Republicans in the past, and I could
I
never
have
vote.
been.
I could never vote Democrat. So
I understand that because I have too as a candidate, but in some respects, I like the platform, and that keeps me in the Republican Party. And
yeah,
I don't see it very useful to um, follow. The reason Bill Clinton became president twice was because Ross Perot went in there and did the Reform Party, and a lot of people were supportive, and then the independents were supportive of Ross Perot, but he didn't have enough to win. So all he did is enable Bill Clinton to win with a minority.
yeah.
So basically, in some respects, our 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 government is a two-party system right now, and sure, there are independents that want to start and can win congressional seats now and then, but usually they tend to be ones that are more liberal, like in Maine,
Yeah,
as
I
well
agree.
as Bernie Sanders being independent, but he's really a socialist Democrat.
Communist.
So,
He's a
yeah,
communist. He's not an independent. But yeah, I got it.
But he doesn't call him, when he's a senator, he calls himself an independent. He doesn't call him, or most of his career, he's called himself an independent, not a Democrat.
Yeah.
So basically that's what he's a communist. And so, but Gus Hall was a presidential candidate in 1976, in which Brennan was a fan, and the former CIA chief, voted
John.
for him, as well as Angela Davis and others. And so in some respects, having red or pink Democrats isn't new, particularly when it was infesting the State Department during Roosevelt's administration. So basically, the politics we're seeing now isn't new, but all I can say is, for your listeners, get out and vote Republican. And I understand your desire to be independent and such like that, but for
We're
me,
dead meat. I know. I understand. Independents are dead meat. Particularly if you're running for president, because you're running 50 different state campaigns, and you need a massive organization to do that. My big problem is that today, while there is there's some difference between Democrats and Republicans at the national level, I just think they're also endeared and committed to this two-party system that they've essentially, how should I say it?
well,
They've essentially overthrown the will of the people, and it's just the corporate system now.
Yeah, well, I understand that, but part of the problem, there was a U.S. senator that I really liked in the late 1990s by the name of Senator Bob Smith, who's a Republican senator from New Hampshire, classic conservative or whatever else, but he dropped out of the Republican Party and joined the Independence Party for a while with Harold Phillips, because he was upset with the rhinos and the Republican Party, and basically decided to do that. But basically what happened for him was a lot of Republican supporters in New Hampshire kind of said that they weren't going to support him for running for re-election, so he decided to join the Republicans again. So he made both sides angry at him. And so basically in 2002,
destroyed his career.
John Sununu ended up being the Republican candidate because he lost the primary in 2002. So in some respects, him becoming independent was never forgiven. And so he lost his Senate seat that was considered safe because he went that route. But I'm not certain whether he objected to it. But there are also classic Republicans like Gordon Humphrey now, who's essentially abandoned the Republican Party and becoming Democrat and pro-abortion Democrat, where he was a pro-life Republican in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And so he basically became a liberal Democrat, just like Goldwater had, and as well as Arlen Specter. So in some respects, uh, when people get old, sometimes they get insane. They join the Democratic Party regarding politics if they want to keep their
Yeah.
power structure. So unfortunately,
Right. Power
that's the
structure.
nature of the beast. So you
Absolutely.
got to make the best out of what you have. And I've been a candidate twice for U.S. Senate in Hawaii and once for the Congress in 2002 in New Hampshire. And I had a great time as a Republican doing it, even though I didn't win the primaries. But
Right.
there were specific reasons I didn't win the primaries, which I couldn't fight. But basically, I had a great time getting out to meet people, and at least they had a choice. So
Yeah.
basically, even my getting into politics as a candidate is an interesting story. In case you're interested, I can tell that story too.
You can look. We can cover anything and everything.
Well,
So go
it's
for it.
related to me being a chemist. So basically, when I was working in Decatur, Illinois, as a chemist for AE Scaling Manufacturing Company, they make cornstarch and corn sweeteners and such like that. And basically,
Mhm.
they used to make Staley syrup, which many of your listeners may have heard of in the past. But basically, they've
Yeah.
been cornstarch and corn syrup for a long time. And so basically, I was working for them as a chemist. They started a political action committee. And basically, in the 70s, I had followed the Nixon problems and everything else, and
Mhm.
the Senate Intelligence Committee and others who were trying to get Nixon impeached. Basically, there were some people on the Democrat side who went after Nixon, and I thought there was some honor there regarding one in particular, Senator Daniel Inouye from Hawaii, and basically in a way I was expecting, I thought he was an honest guy and such like that, because it seemed, at least publicly, he was. I tend to give them the benefit of the doubt first. But the point was that basically where I was working at AE Staley, basically what happened was they started a political action committee there. And this was in 1985, around the time of Iran-Contra. And the Democrats in the U.S. Senate and House were trying to get Ronald Reagan impeached because he mined the harbors, got the CIA involved and mined the harbors of Nicaragua, Nicaragua, to essentially prevent the Sandinistas from getting arms and materials from the Soviet Union. And so basically he had gone around Congress and basically tried to get support for the Contras, as well as to stop the Soviet Union from actively supporting the Sandinistas. And so basically Ronald Reagan's administration has essentially mined the harbors of Managua. And basically what happened was that the Senate Democrats as well as House Democrats wanted to impeach President Reagan because he was going around Congress. And basically one of the leaders, the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Senator Daniel Inouye, was posturing and such like that about how he wasn't informing Congress, et cetera, else. And basically the classic Democrat going after the Republican president. And so desiring to impeach Republicans presidents started with Richard Nixon, and he resigned to avoid that because he tried to cover things up. And so, yeah. And then they went after Ronald Reagan for similar reasons, tried to go around Congress. And so basically Senator Inouye liked to do a lot of posturing. But in 1985, the Staley set up a political action committee, and they invited Senator Daniel Inouye to come in and speak to the group. And he was a great supporter of Arthur Daniels Midland as well as Staley to help get the billions of dollars for corn alcohol, trash mash, we called it, as well as what that does is if you pay billions of dollars, which is essentially waste material, alcohol things, basically what it does is it artificially decreases the price of corn sweetener. So basically ADM and Staley were involved in trying to get Coke and Pepsi to have high fructose corn syrup in 1985. I was on the taste testers for that. And so basically Senator Inouye was coming to the group and he was giving a speech saying how he's grateful for ADM and Staley to help keep the price supports high on Hawaii sugar because that helped Hawaii sugar farmers. Well, there's a problem there. When you keep the price of sugar very high, and the federal government is paying billions of dollars for essentially trash moonshine, essentially, and it brings down the cost of high fructose corn syrup. Basically, what's that going to do is essentially destroy the market for sugar. And so basically, I saw that being a problem, and so basically, as a chemist, I saw that this is the problem with politics today. Is one industry is destroyed because of special interests on other industries working of another to essentially do this. And sounds right. But then Senator Inouye got into a big political rant against Ronald Reagan, saying that he should be impeached because he wasn't informing his Senate Intelligence Committee about the mining in the Nicaraguan harbors. But unfortunately, the week before, I read the National Review, which it talked about a report that the CIA had prepared for his Senate Intelligence Committee. And basically, during the question and answer, I asked the question, I said, Senator Inouye, you talk about the fact that he wasn't informing Congress. Well, didn't the CIA present a report to your committee saying that they basically were mining the harbors in Nicaragua because the Soviet Union was actively bringing arms and munitions into Managua to support the Sandinistas? And he said, he basically postured, hemmed and hawed and said, I didn't read it. And so what happened was a lot of the audience laughed and everything else because I caught the guy in a lie, because basically he wasn't reading the reports that the CIA were presenting. They were saying they were going to impeach Ronald Reagan because he wasn't informing Congress, but he was. And so essentially I made him look bad. And then I found out later he tried to get me fired. So that was my experience of scraping and making a U.S. senator look stupid in front of a crowd. So, amen. And I was only 28 years old at the time. So in a way, it's like that's with things. But time went by, and then I ended up getting into teaching. And then we ended up, after teaching for a couple of years chemistry in Micronesia, I ended up in Hawaii in 1997. Found out that Senator Inouye was running for U.S. Senate in 1998. I got the support of the Republican Party in Hawaii and decided that I was going to run for his Senate seat as a Republican and try and win the primary. So basically, I went around Hawaii saying how he was how he essentially destroyed the Hawaii sugar farmers, because basically what had happened in the interim in the 12 years since, the Hawaii sugar industry was destroyed because Coke and Pepsi and Kraft Foods and General Foods was putting high fructose corn syrup and everything and not using sugar. So basically what happened was that basically I ended up running the primary and I came in third out of 9 candidates, and I didn't win because the top 2 candidates were put up by the Democrats so that I didn't win. And so basically, but I got a lot of Republicans upset at me because I was going after their good friend, and one in particular called me an a-hole, Senator John McCain, who was a good friend of Senator Inouye. And basically he was another corrupt Republican, which isn't new.
Absolutely.
He knows that. And so basically what happened was that I ended up going after him, and I came in 3rd out of 9 in the primary, had a great time, but they had 2 Democrats who became Republicans just for the primary who came in 1st and 2nd. So I came in 3rd out of 9. And so I had a great time, and the primary and general was close together. So a lot of people thought I was going to win. And so in a way, freaking out Senator Inouye because I was going around Hawaii saying he was at fault because he destroyed the Hawaii sugar
industry.
Was a great political thing to go after him for. He admitted as such later, a few years later, that I was right about that because he basically was being very political and supporting the ADM and state.
Wherever the money comes from, hey, if you got the money, you got their vote.
and so basically it was a great experience doing that. But then of course he won the general, and then Senator Daniel Kaka was up in 2000, and he had the same issues regarding that because he was also another supporter of the Hawaii, of the high fructose corn syrup and ethanol programs as a junior senator. And so basically he played a role in destroying the Hawaii sugar industry also. But basically I came in 2nd out of 4 in that primary. And basically they had an old rhino who won the primary there, but he just basically destroyed his campaign. But I had a great time going after those 2 Democrats as a chemist and chemistry teacher in a classic sense. I didn't have to win. I didn't spend much money, but I had a great time going around meeting people. And that's what I encourage all of your listeners. If you're really upset and want to do something, try and run and be a candidate and convince people of the rightness of your position. And at least you'll get out people to come out and vote. Whether you win or not isn't the point. I happen to believe that's in God's hands. And so basically that's what I was involved in. And then we moved to New Hampshire, and I ended up running against the Republican congressman incumbent in the primary there as the pro-life conservative alternative to Representative Charlie Bass in the 2nd district of New Hampshire. And I got 13% of the vote there. But at least I helped him win the general, and because there was a liberal Democrat running against him in the general, which was worse. But the point was, I still played a role in helping get conservatives to come out and vote. So in a way, I'm glad I played a role even there in New Hampshire. But I had my reasons there because I was pro-life. He was a rhino, pro-abortion Republican congressman who wouldn't support President Bush and what he was trying to do in reforming the system. And so basically I went after him in the primary. But a lot of Republicans in New Hampshire didn't like the fact that I was taking him on either. So, but I didn't care. So I had a good time anyway. And he liked me at the end, which showed that I did the right thing anyway. So that's my history of being a candidate, but I haven't been a candidate since, but I still follow it along. So if anything I can say to your listeners is be involved, support your Republican candidates as well as independents that have a chance. But in some respects, we're in an age where a vote for an independent is usually a vote for the Democrat. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of the beast, that basically
that really is true.
Not voting or voting for a weak independent who can't win the general or the primary isn't necessarily beneficial to the long run to get in to change things, because what we need in Congress is to have a sizable majority in the House and the Senate, particularly more than 60 seats in the Senate to avoid any filibuster
proof. Yeah.
So that's the thing. But basically what I see what's happening with the Durham thing is that AG Barr got exactly the right person, and essentially he's doing his job now of trying to root out the origins of the 2016 Russia hoax stuff and everything else, and the corruption that was going on in the FBI and the DOJ as part of the Obama administration corruption, as well as the Hillary Clinton corruption, because she was Secretary of State under Obama. So that really isn't new either, even though people might think it's new.
Yeah, I think it just shocked the living crap out of the Democrats that Trump won. Everybody, at least I believe, going into the 2016 election, Trump was the selected loser in this two-party system. It just seems that they keep switching back and forth, that after 4 to 8 years of a candidate, you really kind of sick of one party. And they really so expected Hillary to win. They got so sloppy. I don't think they really thought that chance that Trump had a chance.
Well, Trump even thought that Hillary would win too. So in some respects, he was a bit surprised. But I wasn't, because I'd been out there to realize that there was enough of an undercurrent that I thought he could win. But I supported Ted Cruz in the primary. I have no objection. I think that Ted Cruz would have won a more convincing victory, but unfortunately, he didn't have enough support to win the primary. President Trump did. And the thing that's interesting, the connections there, Corey Lewandowski, his campaign chairman, whatever else, I met him first in 2002 when he was the campaign chairman for Senator Bob Smith in New Hampshire. So I had met him before when he was a young guy working for Senator Smith. So in some respects, there was some history there regarding me knowing Corey, but I don't know. I have any idea whether he remembered me or not. But the point was, I understood why he was in there supporting President Trump and what he was trying to do, and the grassroots support that he got. But a lot of people don't realize that that President Trump basically spent very little money to win the general election, whereas Hillary Clinton spent over $2 billion to lose, which in some respects a lot of people don't realize. And the best thing about what the Trump winning did was essentially destroy the career of Hillary Clinton, as well as essentially ended any possibility of her ever becoming president, as well as even now exposing rhinos, which are Republicans in name only, who have essentially interfered with more classic conservative Republicans that want to run and make a difference, whereas they get backstabbed and such like that by people who are more in it for the business, not in it because they're principled Republicans. So unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast too. But there aren't any Rockefeller Republicans anymore. They're losing. They're abandoning the Republican Party, which is a good thing. And yet it's a situation where that started, I think, with Ronald Reagan back in 1980, because he did not have the support of a lot of Republicans at the time. And that's one reason he picked George H.W. Bush to be his vice president, because it was a way that President Reagan could reach out to the other Republicans and say, and essentially win against Jimmy Carter, which in a way was a good move. But unfortunately, what it did was there were people trying to undermine President Reagan also. So unfortunately,
I'm aware of that.
That's not new either.
Yeah. Well, I kind of, my whole view, a lot of the 2016 election is essentially that Hillary was the selected winner. But the reason that they brought Bernie Sanders along and they brought Trump in is because the party system was being fractured and it was being moved apart, just by the different factions within the Democrats and Republican Party. With the Tea Party group and the standard, I don't know what you want to call them, run of the mill conservatives. I don't even want to call them that. I should say the party team conservatives. And the same way with the Democrats and their core power system, power team, and then the socialist side that Sanders brought in. I thought that it was an election that was set up for the minorities to to entice them back to the party system itself, because itself was kind of shattering some. And without the socialists, go ahead.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just how I view all that.
But that's part of why Ronald Reagan won in 1980 as well as 1984. He got a lot of conservative Democrat support. And so the first one who was really able to get that back was President Trump. After essentially Bill Clinton had destroyed his own brand by essentially with the corruption of the Clinton administration and the fact that Hillary and him were involved in, and he lied before a grand jury, got impeached for the right reasons, not the bad reasons, but the right reasons. He even ended up getting disbarred later for it and paid a fine. But the thing is, he did lie to a federal grand jury, whereas that
absolutely did.
President Trump never did, but Bill Clinton did. And so in some respects, it was a soiled thing. But a lot of Republicans don't realize that Bill Clinton never won a majority when he ran for president. It's like Ross Perot was in there in 1992 as well as 1996. And unfortunately, the Republicans put up Bob Dole in 1996. It wasn't a strong candidate either. He kind of got half lame support, and Ross Perot stayed in there. So in some respects, it's like like they asked for the Clintons, and so in some respects, George W. Bush was a reaction to that, which I think is a good thing that he won and was president for 8 years, because we got some good Supreme Court justices out of that. But that wasn't enough to get the rhinos out of the party, because there were too many rhinos who were part of his administration who showed themselves later in their anti-Trump behavior in 2016. So
absolutely.
And McCain was part of the problem there. Mitt Romney also, but unfortunately, that's the nature of it. So
early 2017, wasn't it John McCain that was had said he would plan to take the dossier that I forget his aide's name that had brought it back.
Well, he was involved in the dossier even before that. Yeah. Even before that, in the summer of 2016. So basically he was working to undermine, because again,
undermine the president. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, because they supported other candidates, whether it was Jeb Bush or others. And so basically Senator McCain was a spoilsport too, because he lost the election. But a lot of people don't realize the reason he lost the election was a lot of conservative Republicans didn't turn out and vote for him in 2008. They thumbed their nose and said, no, I'm not voting for that guy. And good for them. But unfortunately, we ended up with Obama for 8 years. So in a sense, the U.S. asked for Obama for 8 years too. So unfortunately, that's the nature.
Well, after 8 years of George W., I think they could have elected a Democrat dog catcher after 8 years of the Republicans, used up their goodwill. And I mean, I just see this pattern where the party in power uses up its goodwill and burns the citizens with new regulations and everything else that of their agenda. And once their agenda is in, everything kind of goes to crap. And then everybody gets this, I call it puke politics syndrome, where, everybody essentially, gets sick of the political system kind of as it's sitting right now. And yeah, it's a terrible thing because we essentially were manipulated, on the Republican and Democrat side, we're manipulated by the politicians. And we get to the point where I look at it, it's my view that the system is working together, that at the top levels, the system itself, the Democrat and Republicans that are parts of that system, they're working together. Mitch McConnell, McCarthy, Pelosi and Schumer, it's as if they're separate, but they're all still working together and working through that same system to keep it intact. And I just don't have a lot of faith in the way it trickle up politics the way we have.
Well, unfortunately, that's the nature of the thing. And in spite of the fact that a lot of conservatives have difficulty with Senator McConnell, he represents well the state of Kentucky and got reelected to do a job. And he also plays political hardball against Schumer, which in a sense is necessary. He doesn't roll over for Schumer. He didn't roll over for Harry Reid either. So unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast going on there. And even Representative McCarthy is a good foil to prevent the excesses of Nancy Pelosi, even though he doesn't have much power to change anything as a minority leader. So unfortunately, until the Republican caucus picks someone else, they're kind of stuck with it. And I don't think a lot of conservatives are realizing that Senator McConnell is the Senate Majority Leader or Minority Leader because he has the support to be the Senate Minority Leader, as well as Representative McCarthy has the support to be the House Minority Leader, and the other more conservative people don't. And so basically,
I understand.
There's a need to get things done also in things, particularly about other things in the budget. Believe it or not, over 90% of the budget, both parties agree with, and most Americans agree with what needs to be passed through the committees and everything else needs to get through with that because it's all essentially agreed. But when you get into political issues that are fire-breathing dragon things and such like that, then that's where the differences show up between Pelosi and McCarthy, or between Schumer and things. And basically, I met Senator McConnell. Basically, Senator McConnell was very supportive in my running for U.S. Senate. So basically, he knew what I was trying to do against Senator Inouye and Akaka, is essentially trying to get them to spend as much money as they could in Hawaii. So it wasn't available in the mainland for other Democrat candidates.
Races.
So basically, there is a method to this, and a lot of people don't understand the nature of the politics, that it is hardball, and unfortunately you need people who can play the game appropriately and win when it's possible to win. But Senator McConnell can't really do anything until the Republicans can beat a filibuster. So that's kind of what he's stuck with, as well as Representative McCarthy. And I don't think Representative McCarthy will ever be House Speaker, because I think that if Republicans take over again in 2023, winning the generals in the fall, which I hope they do.
Right.
Essentially, the Republican caucus might decide to make President Trump House Speaker, which would be fabulous to make President Trump House Speaker. And then he has even more power than the president, and essentially can be House Speaker for 2 years while he runs for U.S. For president again, and essentially even might decide to stay as House Speaker with DeSantis running in 2024, or Ted Cruz running in 2024 to be the president. And basically there's nothing that Congress can do or anything can do about if President Trump is the House Speaker for the rest of, as long as he wants to be, because he can do a lot more as a House Speaker than he can as a president, with the kind of backstabbing he got from the Republicans, or those
that was some cabinet, wasn't it? That was a cabinet full of Caesars or Brutuses, excuse me.
well, he didn't know that. He was naive, but also he felt it was necessary to get qualified people in regarding who had the credentials to do it, and he gives people the benefit of doubt until they give him reason not to. And unfortunately, as someone who grew up being very gullible and trusting people until I got reasons otherwise, people may have thought, well, I've been taken advantage of all my career and such like that. Well, yeah, but I don't have any regrets. I'd rather be that attitude than one of suspicious of everybody. So again, it's a situation where life is complicated, and I still think that President Trump was able to accomplish a lot more, despite all the pressure against him from the rhinos, as well as from the Democrats who tried to thwart what he was doing. He was still a very effective president, unlike Jimmy Carter. Unlike Jimmy Carter in 1977 to 80. And so basically, in some respects, he was one of the most effective presidents for a one-term president, whatever else, and he still may end up getting a second term with the placeholder of Biden, who basically, because basically President Trump can essentially do a lot of executive orders and essentially wipe out everything that Biden did during the thing, because none of it was passed through Congress, just like he wiped out what President Obama had done for 8 years in just the first few months of his term in 2017. So basically, there's no reason he can't do that again, and his second term will be a lot more effective. But he has to decide whether he wants to do it or not. But again, it comes down to people don't realize that he did win the primary in 2016 because all the other 18 other candidates weren't strong enough to essentially beat him. And
Hillary Clinton. Hillary also, I think it was also Hillary Clinton had suggested that she had wanted Donald Trump to win the nomination. And I believe it was might have been a Slate article that was put out, if I remember right.
Well, they thought
Hillary Clinton believed he could be the Pied Piper candidate for the Republican Party. And, that's one of the news stories that I remember seeing was the questioning of why Donald Trump wasn't being targeted viciously in the primary. And, Hillary Clinton effectively had all the media behind her. She had the media working essentially as in her press office. And they, the news was shaped to take out different candidates along the way and to leave Donald Trump alone. I mean, that was something that I noticed.
That
run up to the primary.
They did think that he would be the weakest candidate, but the point is they didn't understand. She called most of the American public deplorables. So it's like That's the problem with elite Democrats who live in the bubble. They don't understand the American people in general, what normal working people out there are. And so it's a kind of thing where they have no comprehension at all about it. But basically, the thing is, there was an arrogance that basically Clinton thought that she could beat any Republican, and they didn't really care who won the primary. They just knew that they were prepared to beat whoever they had. But unfortunately, it didn't help. It didn't help the Trump administration to have Jeb Bush supporters and Rubio supporters, and who were in Congress, who were essentially trying to undermine him even after he won the general election. So it's the kind of thing where, in some respects, I ran into some Republicans who were on the Rubio side, who thought it was a good thing that Trump was impeached. And basically because Rubio, as well as Burr, was on the Senate Intelligence Committee, they essentially let Senator Warner run the committee, who's a Democrat. And so essentially the Senate Intelligence Committee was essentially a Democrat-run group, whereas Devin Nunes and the House Intelligence Committee were able to accomplish a lot more because of the fact that they were essentially run by the Republicans, whereas in the Senate, there were too many anti-Trump Republicans who were essentially letting the Democrats run the show and working to undermine the president because but I saw that myself with being a candidate in the past too, that there were people a lot more upset because I decided to run against the incumbent Republican in the U.S. House in New Hampshire because I was pro-life, he wasn't, and I was a real Republican and he wasn't, and such like that. So in some respects, I ran into that same thing myself with people trying to backstab me, whatever. But I didn't care. I was in it for the right reasons. So in a way, it's like I just enjoyed making fun of Representative Bass, and so even when
how dare you rock the boat? Is that what they were worried about? You can't rock the boat.
And his name was Representative Charlie Bass, and basically I was invited to be a debate. He decided not to come. So basically I accepted the debate invitation from a place in Nashua, New Hampshire, and I decided to debate a can of tuna fish. So I said, here's
there's Charlie.
Charlie the tuna bass. Something smells fishy. I put the can of tuna fish on the chair and said, yes, here I am to debate the can of tuna fish. So I had a good time with it too. But Katrina Sweat, who was the strongest Democrat candidate, basically was all prepared to go after Charlie Bass in the general election, accusing him of being conservative Republican and such like that. But the fact that I was running against him as a conservative, he was the moderate. So in a way, he came across looking good to the independents in New Hampshire. And so essentially, I helped him win the general election because Katrina Sweat couldn't label him as a wacko conservative Republican.
Far righters.
Well, I was a far righter, but so in a way, I played my own role for the general, which I was happy to do. I wanted the House Republicans to stay Republican, that district to stay Republican, because I was there in New Hampshire to teach chemistry. I wasn't there to run for politics, but the fact is that I decided to do it because he was pumping up his pro-abortion credentials in a way that I found particularly horrible in 2002. So basically, it was enough to upset me and get me, 2001 as well as 2002, particularly because President Bush was trying to pass the partial birth abortion ban as well, and Representative Bass was not supportive of that. So that's one reason it didn't pass the House, was because Republicans,
Wow.
pro-death, pro-abortion Republicans were against that, and so, as well as a few pro-abortion Republican senators. So in some respects, I saw it myself, but that's the nature of the thing. You people got to take the risk of standing up for what's right anyway. And so basically that's the nature of the thing. So
I'm aware of that.
so when does a break happen?
We'll have a break. Oh, I'm sorry. I killed the break at the bottom when we were rolling along pretty good at the bottom of the hour. We got about 3 minutes to the break, top of the hour break. Would take about 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay, that's good, because I have to use the restroom. So in case. So
well, any if you have to, you go. I can talk. Trump Russia collusion. This started before the election, and it actually started, in late 2015, is really kind of when
it started before that too, because there were certain politicians in the U.S. that didn't like the fact he was a real estate developer and would interfere in foreign relations with trying to generate business and get Trump towers in a bunch of city states that basically were not on the acceptable list for regarding the Obama administration's approved list of countries to do business with. So in some respects, just him being a successful businessman was the things. And Representative Nadler of New York City essentially has been going after President Trump for decades, all the way back to the 90s, trying to get him in jail and such like that. So in some respects, him having liberal Democrat opponents, even as a businessman in New York City, isn't new either. So basically the fact that he was in there, but the main issue regarding President Trump was people knew that he couldn't be bought, and that's the traction he still has, that he still can't be bought. He doesn't need
their millions and millions of payoffs.
Right, of course. Because, and that's what I found with Senator Inouye, is the level of his corruption, that he sold out Hawaii sugar farmers pretending to appreciate them, essentially showed how deeply corrupt he was, that he was only in it for the power, and just posturing about whether he was going to really help Hawaii or not. Yeah. Because in a way, his method was to bring money to Hawaii and then throw money at the things, but essentially ignore the corruption that still exists in Hawaii regarding the mob and triads and other things like that that have been, very well portrayed in all the different varieties of Hawaii Five-0, particularly. Corruption isn't unknown to Hawaii, and it's been a problem there for decades. And so in some respects, and there are other states that are the same way. Cities, Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, etc., where the Democrats have always run the nature of the political machines, and so
nature
they
of the grip
got the largesse, the benefit of that.
Right.
So.
All right. Hey, we're getting ready to go to break. Everybody will be right back, about 4 to 5 minutes, and more with Gene Douglas next.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, all right, everybody, we're back with Gene Douglas. And,
why don't we have this portion be you ask me questions? I've talked a lot about myself, so why don't you ask me questions now?
Okay. Do you think at what's the time? Do you think there'll be any time frame moving forward with Durham? I mean, we're seeing so much movement right now in the Michael Sussman case, where the details of the plots that are coming out lead directly to Hillary Clinton and directly to the seventh floor of the FBI. And the FBI, the CIA, had already determined that the Alpha Bank allegations brought to them by Michael Sussman, Rodney Jaffe, and the rest of that little crew there, that do you think there'll be much movement in expanding that investion?
Well,
There's lots of ample opportunity. I just don't know if there will.
There's one interview that AG Barr gave back in the summer of 2020, where around the time where he set up the Durham. It was one of the verdict with Ted Cruz things, where basically Ted Cruz and the interviewer there of The Wire basically interviewed and called him the honey badger, AG Barr. And basically he went into for almost a half an hour talking about the Durham, what he had planned, he had appointed Durham to do. And a lot of that has come true. And I encourage all your listeners to watch that. It's still available on YouTube through Verdict with Ted Cruz, and watch that honey badger video again with AG Barr, because it's Durham is still continuing the job that he got put on, and a lot of your listeners do not understand the nature of the DOJ. When the DOJ and when Durham is doing his job, there are not supposed to be leaks. We're not supposed to know what's going on. We only know when he presents evidence in court and such like that. And there's a Twitter space going on right now about the Russia sleuths. And I encourage your viewers listeners to connect to them and perhaps look at my Substack page and see listen to the Twitter spaces where he goes into all the detail of FOIA requests and documentation and such like that. And the thing I appreciate about what the groups have done is essentially they avoid speculating and making up stories. When they have ideas, they'll say, yeah, we think this is what's going to happen, but we don't know for sure. They're not allowing conspiracies to come in here. They're waiting to see the evidence. They want to see the FOIA release documents and such like that. And then they draw conclusions based on what they see on paper, which in a way is a scientific method for looking at that. Correct. And basically there is one guy on there, Fool Nelson, who played a role in exposing Jaffe for who he was as one of the guys who was involved in the I think the Danchenko indictment, as well as some of the other things, basically because they just went for sources, open source, public information, and found out who this person must be, essentially getting a scoop. But the point is they're doing it the right way. And then when these trials, whether it be the Klein-Smith trial before or the Danchenko indictment, or what's going on now with Sussman, essentially when that brings out a lot of evidence that is now available for the public, they're finding that a lot of what they predicted was true is true, and that basically what it is confirmed what the Nunes committee came up with. And there's a couple of great books by Lee Smith, particularly essentially about the one about the impeachment of the president, the Nunes committee and such like that, and what the Nunes committee did. And then his second book, The Permanent Coup, where he goes into detail about that. And there's a lot of things that the Nunes House Select Committee on Intelligence didn't know because the DOJ wasn't cooperating with them regarding getting them documentation, but Durham has access to all that. And so basically, even in this trial now that's going on, that the public is now becoming aware of, at least important people in the public are becoming aware of documents that essentially prove the fact that Clinton was involved from the start in pushing the Russia hoax to avoid dealing with the server issue regarding her email server that was against the law, and essentially when she was, the Secretary of State, and essentially all the other factors that goes into that. So I encourage your listeners to check out my Substack page and listen to the Twitter Spaces for themselves. Look at the documentation for themselves. Read them. And then you'll find out, and I even have the House Intelligence Committee under Nunes interviewing a whole bunch of people, including Sussman, everybody else that are Sussman that's on trial now, where essentially the him and haw and whatever else, and they even lied to the committee. And so basically it led to a lot of referrals that Nunes and the Republican leadership of that committee sent to DOJ. And Durham is, of course, aware of all that. So we're not going to know about it if it's working properly regarding how it's supposed to do, because Durham doesn't leak. His people don't leak.
Right.
And so basically the way I view it, I'm an optimist because of that interview of AG Barr, as well as I'm an optimist because I'm a Christian and happen to believe that eventually all will be exposed, including this crap, because a lot of Democrats were fooled by the corrupt ones in the leadership also. Absolutely. And the Democrats will end up turning on each other, particularly when essentially a lot of Democrats thought highly of themselves because of their own view of looking both sides of the issue, and kind of had a view that they were above the fray, when in reality they've been complicit in supporting the corruption in their own party that essentially robbed Bernie Sanders twice of the nomination, because Hillary and the establishment essentially worked very hard to destroy any possibility of Bernie Sanders winning the primary themselves, because they knew that Bernie Sanders would never win the general election. So basically they saw to it that Bernie Sanders would lose twice in the primaries in 2000 as well as 2020 as well as 2016. So it's nothing. So basically it's not new there either.
Yeah. Well, I think we knew that when they were the Democrat National Committee and Hillary Clinton were sued in Florida court by Bernie Sanders supporters, and the DNC lawyers said, well, they're kind of naive because we can make the wording within our charter, the words fair and honest and equal, we can make them mean anything we want. I was just kind of, I was shocked myself that the DNC lawyers would actually go in the court and claim that the Bernie Sanders supporters were really politically naive because they believed that the primary process was going to be fair and equitable and equal. But one thing that is always a question that I have is, with Joseph Mifsud and his setup of George Papadopoulos, At least that's how I view it.
Well,
And then
the thing that's interesting about this
go ahead.
group is that basically the Russian Sleuths group on Twitter that they're having another thing tonight on, they've come to the conclusion that George Papadopoulos lied a lot in his book as well as other things, and Mischief essentially played no role in it at all. Stephen Halper was much more a factor than Misfit was,
I agree with that.
And basically Papadopoulos made up a story because the DOJ and the Mueller team essentially said, either you sing and tell us some great stories, or we're coming after you. And so they basically, he sang, but basically he fed them a bunch of BS that sent him all over the place. And Misfit, believe it or not, was part of that. So, and because these people working with documents, FOIAs, other things like that too, they've come to the conclusion that George Papadopoulos likes to tell stories and essentially with his tall tales essentially involved Misfit, and Misfit played sort of no role in, or not much role in any of it, whatever else. But that could be wrong too. Who knows? So we don't know what Durham knows about it. And the thing is, we have to wait and see regarding whether Durham's going to do anything about that either.
Yeah, there's so much misdirection in all of this this plot. You know, I looked at the structure of the plot to get Trump. I kind of likened it to the plot terrorist cells would use, where they have different cells in different areas that have different operational status, that have different jobs. And you know, there's a setup team, there's a hook team, there's a financial team.
Well, there's a great book that goes into that called Witness by Whittaker Chambers, where he talks about the American Communist Party during the 1930s, 20s, and 30s in the U.S., of which he played a role in running a cell. Essentially, that is a network of, that is the old Soviet system of the communist thing of getting all the sides to work against the middle and everything else. And essentially, the different cells do their own job. There's there's little coordination at the top to kind of get anybody in trouble. But the point is they all have their own mission, because they're driven by the communist and the Soviet ideology. And that book, Witness by Whittaker Chambers, he goes very thoroughly into that, as well as there's another book called The Intellectuals by Paul Johnson, where he goes and discusses the writings of Marx and Engels and other things like that. And believe it or not, that's part of the Marx-Leninist methodology of essentially disarming your enemies by setting up false equivalencies, as well as pretending they're representing the workers when they're not, etc. And so it's a kind of thing where this isn't new, and that's part of why people need to realize that a lot of this is pretty well read out in a lot of American communist literature, whether it be Saul Alinsky and the Alinsky Manual that Obama liked and everything else. He was a Chicago activist, as well as Noam Chomsky and others who played a role as American communists, essentially pushing certain directions. And there's a great book about a guy who used to be a communist getting the support of the Students for Democratic Society in the late 60s by the name of David Horowitz, who wrote some great books exposing that as well. And basically he runs a conservative think tank now. but he's been warning against this ever since he got converted away from his old communist past, because he grew up in a communist family in New York City and essentially abandoned it years ago. And there's a very interesting book David wrote about his own history, and that's quite excellent. So there's a variety of resources that people can read to get the bigger picture. And yes, you're correct that this is things, but the ideology is what unites them all, and the ends is what's much more important than the means. It's like the means could be anything they can get away with.
Yeah, if they can burn down the neighborhood and call it a peaceful protest.
Of course,
that's one example, I guess.
Well, burn down DC during the summer of 2020 and
January 6th.
And then nobody calls that an insurrection, where they try to storm the White House and burn down the church, the historic church, and other things like that. And hundreds of park police get injured and everything else, but they make a big thing about anarchists essentially intruding in a peaceful protest that the Trump people set up in Washington to essentially ask the Congress to do their job and
I agree 100%.
And trying to discover the real problems with the violations of federal law and what happened in the elections of 2020. So they invented the insurrection of 1/6 because essentially Pelosi decided that she was going to essentially make trouble and then blame Republicans for it. So that unfortunately is the nature of their methodology, is that they get BLM and other anarchists involved. But the thing that's interesting now is that the BLM activists are being exposed for the corrupt people they are, using the money to buy houses in California and other things like that. So it's like they're discredited themselves. And so in some respects, I think the backlash of what's going to happen in the fall is going to be quite profound. And all these things essentially will lead to essentially the destruction, and I hope it works out this way, the destruction of the Democratic Party as a force in American politics for hopefully the next few decades, which would be great. But we'll see.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the Democrat Party is facing a lot of I don't want to call it bad press, criminal press, I guess is a good description, with the Hunter Biden laptop. And of course, with this, the Sussman investigation and John Durham's team exposing the Democrat Party and the the Clinton team, it truly is something that is slowly unraveling. We have Dan, I guess it's Danchenko's trials coming up next, isn't it?
Correct. That's in October. And
all the way in October.
And I encourage anybody that's really interested to go to the documentation to see for themselves, because I've got it on the page I was referring to. Also, I've got all the different Twitter spaces that they've been discussing it, as well as all the documents that people can download and read for themselves too. And so I encourage any of your listeners to do the research for themselves and such like that. But just start out by just listening to the Twitter spaces starting back in October, because the first one I recorded was one that Michael Caputo, who was part of the Trump administration, describes his own history about what happened regarding that. And he goes into detail about his own experience with the Durham, with the Mueller team and others like that. And then goes and explains a lot of it. And then they have a bunch of other people on there too, like Felix Sater and others who give their stories. So basically, I enjoy listening to it because I'm a big picture guy. I don't know all the details that these other investigators have, but the other investigators essentially been looking and finding the information for themselves with federal documents and evidence and other things too, and not just relying on conspiracy theories or stories spread around by people that want to make something that isn't there.
Yeah, through my research, I've basically been looking at and documenting all of the news stories week by week, really since 2017. And I take all the news stories and I cross-reference all of them. And you can find some common facts, you can see some common flaws, and you can see where the liberal media is more consistent with their falsehoods, I guess, because they try to get somewhat to the big picture and they use these bullet points. But the news stories, that's another reason why I trust very little what I actually read in the news. And it really doesn't matter what network it is. If it's a mainstream, I certainly don't trust them. And if it's alternative media of some kind, I try to read it, I read them all double close, so to speak, just for the simple fact that the information that they all put in there, they all are kind of hedging their bias, what their point of view is at the time for whoever they're writing for. But there is a lot of information, bits and pieces there, but I think only about 50% of it's true. What this
group has been doing is using FOIA, the federal open access records thing, essentially to get the documentations for themselves, even redacted ones that may shed some light on what really was going on and such like that, because they've been very successful in even getting emails from Georgia Tech as well that exposed Jaffe, as well as the other people at Georgia Tech and what they were trying to do regarding a Fusion GPS and other things like that. And a lot of that came from their FOIA research and asking the Georgia Tech people for public records of emails from these various people. Yeah. So basically the thing that's interesting about what they do is they use a scientific method to do that.
Right.
And so again, I applaud what you've been doing yourself with the news stories, but unfortunately with the mainstream media, you can't trust much of what's in print either.
Agreed.
because it's quite obvious a lot of those stories have been fed to them by Fusion GPS and other people with axes to grind that basically want to sell to the jury. But there's a very interesting book about the subject, about how the press can be used for nefarious purposes, by Michael Crichton. There's a book called State of Fear, where he goes, where it has to do with the extreme environmental group who used the press and such like that to set off the global warming thing and even try and start a war with propaganda, whatever else. And it's an excellent, very excellent book that is even very germane to now, even though he wrote it back in, I guess, 2005 or something like that. But it's really quite interesting, the nature of the propaganda mills isn't new either, because when I was growing up in the 70s, they had the coming ice age and such like that, because they're trying to scare people regarding, new glaciers are right around the corner and such like that. So we got we got to fix the climate because we're coming to a new ice age. And then it became global warming, and now it's climate change because global warming has been disproved. So again, climate change is normal, cycles are normal, and a lot of people won't admit that the Great Lakes were carved out by glaciers. They weren't just put there with a ice cream scoop. But the glaciers carved out the Great Lakes and the Hudson River Valley. And if there were glaciers once that carved out the things, yes, it's gotten warmer since then, and it'll get cold again. But man isn't involved in any of that. So,
well, I remember those brutal 70 winters. Some of them were pretty chilly. Of course. I was in high school then, so so I remember.
Well, I graduated in 75, so I'm probably a little older than you, but
3 years. I graduated.
Yeah, we had the same kind of, and I thought it was stupid then, and it's stupid now. But I have a good memory that I remember the fear mongering that went on in the 70s, and so I realized that this isn't new. It's just a different crop of people that fall
absolutely. A lot of people that I've spoke with don't quite understand the Alpha Bank allegations and or how they got the DNS data that they actually gave the FBI. I know there's been a lot of information about that coming from Georgia Tech and DARPA related contract. Can you explain that to people?
Yeah. Well, basically the Twitter space groups, there's a intense discussion of these things at various weeks that I think will be very useful for your listeners to listen to them. But just to summarize, because I've had a computer hobby since I was 10, DNS is essentially domain name server. Okay. So for example, if you put in CBS.com to find out the TV network, or Paramount.com or ColumbiaPictures.com or something like that, the DNS server essentially translates that English terms of CBS.com into the IP address, which is 4 numbers, that sends the query to that different place. And basically that's what a DNS server is. And all your internet providers have DNS servers. Google has their own. I happen to use one myself called OpenDNS.com, which has a filtering apparatus that basically filters out porn and other bad stuff that I don't want on my computer, and you know, scammers and other things like that. I just can't even visit the sites. So basically I use it for my own self, just because I don't want that crap anywhere near me. But the point is, again, the DNS is a domain name server thing, and it's very easy to spoof DNS things, particularly because all it means is that they type in alphabank.com or something like that from a wireless connection near the Trump Tower. You know, they just piggyback on the internet thing, and then they go to alphabank.com and just query it and pull up the web page. And that supposedly is a ping regarding going to that thing. And it goes through what is called a DNS server, which keeps a record of it. And so basically that's what Jaffe and company tried to do, is set up phony things using Spectrum Health in Michigan and Chicago area that kind of had a Trump email server there, and had kind of set up phony DNS pings of certain people at those places querying Alpha Bank, which is a Russian bank that has Putin connections, and basically Jaffe and others set up that method to essentially, and it's called spoofing, spoofing thing. So basically, it was very easy for the techs, and this is what came out in the trial recently. That basically is very easy for the techs at the FBI to figure out within a day. There was just testimony on this, that within a day that they found that the Alpha Bank stuff was crap, and that basically it had been falsified, where certain people sent in pings and other things like that, essentially hijacking servers or doing it mechanically, because they had access to all the data, and so they just made it up, and so basically that's what that is. But again, that's just part of the connection that the Hillary Clinton campaign was trying to do in setting false information through Sussman, who essentially lied to the FBI because he was representing the Clinton campaign, and basically lied to the FBI, providing evidence of this supposedly Russia bank connection to the FBI. And then Jaffe went, and Fusion GPS went around that and essentially notified the press, willing people in the press. And there's a whole bunch of emails that came out from Fusion GPS to members of the press, where they were setting up these stories in advance. So basically with two ways: one through Sussman to the FBI and the CIA, and another to the press. And so the press reports kind of confirmed what Sussman was telling the FBI. So,
right.
But they were basically coming from the same place. And that was Jaffe and et cetera, and Hillary Clinton and Fusion GPS setting all that story up. And even the dossier, the Steele dossier, was run out of Denchenko and the Brookings Institution with Strobe Talbot and others. And a lot of people think that there were members of the Hillary campaign, as well as Steele, as well as people at Brookings, as well as Denchenko and others, making up stories about supposedly Trump connections and antics that went on in Moscow, et cetera. So essentially to get people involved who were involved in his campaign connected to Russia too. But it essentially was a big distraction to get the DOJ and the FBI away from investigating the Hillary illegal mail server that she had set up for her use during her tenure as Secretary of State. And basically, even that is an offshoot from what Hillary found with the Starr report way back in the 1990s, where basically there was a lot of documents that were found of Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton that were found through public sources. And so basically what the Clintons decided to do was set up their own server to get it off of the federal server situation, so that they had control over who would have access to it, and it could be easily disposed of if there was anything tawdry or anything illegal discussed in that they could essentially destroy it themselves with just saying oops at the end. So
it's like the Durham team, or not the Durham team, excuse me. It's like the Robert Mueller team. I refer to him as Sideshow Bob the Turd. At Bob's team, magically all the lawyers, almost all of them, accidentally wiped their phones after the investigation was over. Even
what's happening in the Sussman trial and everything else, and what the Durham people have already submitted into the public record, has essentially discredited the whole Mueller report and everything else, because even the Flynn was essentially declared not guilty way back in December of 2016, even before he got
charged and indicted,
charged, as well as the all the other people who were involved in the Mueller report were essentially cleared by the FBI and whatever else. But there were people at the leadership of the FBI that decided to reopen investigations and whatever else, to say there must be something there, but there must be something there. And so basically they could use,
we can make something there
going on and tell the press about it. So it must mean it's true. But in reality, that's not the way that DOJ is supposed to work. And that's why a lot of people don't understand that we had years of this, leaks and such like that. So even Republicans think that the DOJ leaks and such like that, if we don't hear anything, that is supposedly bad news, when in reality, we shouldn't be hearing anything from Durham. Yeah. There shouldn't be any leaks and whatever else. What matters is what gets presented in court and what comes out in these pleadings. And there's an awful lot of information that was released as just part of the Danchenko indictment, the Kleinsmith indictment, as well as the Sussman trial that's going on right now. So the only way for people to really understand that is to read it for themselves and see for themselves or whatever else. And I've spent ever since October, when I don't really know how I got connected with the group, whatever else, but I've been very impressed with what they've been doing, because they've got a good feel for the facts, and they admit it when they're speculating, but they're not going to jump to conclusions based on just rumors. Yeah. So it's a kind of thing where there are people out there spinning tales, which essentially very counterproductive. And unfortunately, that's what happened with the tales being spread that kind of interfered with the legitimate attempts to investigate the fraud that went on in the 2020 elections. Because of the false stories that were, and essentially the way naive Republicans were used by nefarious characters whose job it was to present false information to the things as a way to distract and make the other side look stupid.
Take them down a dead end road and drop them off, basically. Correct. Yeah. So I had a question. And this is kind of pertaining to this, to the Alpha Bank stuff. It was, I remember that when it was reported early in all of this, that it was alleged at one time that Emily McMullen, the alleged sister of Evan McMullen, CIA presidential candidate out of Utah in 2016, it was alleged that she had something to do with the Alpha Bank server, the setup, or something along that lines. I remember seeing that in the media, but you really never heard anything about it after that. I just always now believe that was another one of these dead enders that the government counterintelligence political operatives create. I think Q is one of those operations. That it's essentially gives people some information, lead them to a dead end, and drop them off in the midst of being frustrated. Hopefully they strike out or get angry, and then you can use your wrap-up smears from there. But I've always wondered about that, and because once you saw that story, and you saw it once or twice, it never appeared again. And now it's a question of whether it was true and they tried to hide it, or it was just so untrue that everybody dropped it. So I've often wondered about that, because I still have never, I still haven't heard, or you never hear, you never hear of that. So I always now, I've always, for a while, I've kind of believed that that was somewhat one of those dead end roads that they try to lead people down. Um, so I don't know, but that's why everything you see and you hear, it kind of has to be in question or questioned, because until we have the trial, until the FOIA request, until the stuff comes out, it's so hard to really know the truth. Um, the Durham, the not Durham, excuse me, the Steele dossier. They released 17 memos. I think it's about 35, 36 pages of the Durham, excuse me, I keep saying Durham, of the Steele dossier. When if you look at the numbering and stuff on the Steele dossier and compare the dates and side by side, you have basically starting at memo number 80 in June and ending up with memo 166. So, there's a lot of that is quote unquote missing of what the Steele dossier actually is. And so I often wonder what is in the missing parts of the Steele dossier, because everybody talks about the Steele dossier,
Well,
but it's all false. I know it's all false and it's all leaks, but what are the other calls and the other memos? I know one of those memos, Christopher Steele said was a phone call to somebody.
Well, again, that's part of the method of, because it keeps people guessing if they take numbers out. So basically the whole point of all this is it's like the Steele compiled a whole bunch of different stories he made up and others made up and sent in, and basically they presented it to Harry Reid. They presented it. It ended up going to John McCain. It ended up going to the FBI. It ended up going through John McCain to the FBI again through another way.
Right.
It ended up being the background for why they went after Papadopoulos and Carter Page and others who were the other part of the four or five people, Manafort, etc., as well as going after Trump because of supposedly nefarious things that were going on there. So again, you can't trust anything of that, even the numbering. And so
I agree.
I think it's kind of silly to kind of to read so much more into it that isn't really.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I do, because for the simple fact, we know Jonathan Weiner in the State Department, who had worked some with Steele, was effectively deleting all their emails and, all the contacts and all the information they had.
Weiner, as well as Fiona Hill, they both had connections to Danchenko in the Brookings Institution. So, and even Chalupa and others that were involved there. And I think when the Danchenko trial happens, they will start releasing a whole lot of information regarding the background for convicting Danchenko that starts in October. So basically, a lot of the documentation that has come out that is being used against Sussman now essentially will be released by Durham to the court in the Eastern District of Virginia, not in DC. but the Eastern District of Virginia, which has a different jury pool. And so it's a situation where I think they'll learn a lot more about all that. And that's the value of what these guys, the Russian sleuths, has come up with, is essentially they look at all this documentation. They use FOIAs as well, and they've been able to kind of compile it all together and then work individually and even a little part, different couples of them,
Right.
whatever else, working together regarding getting FOIAs and such like that, and
Not overlapping each other.
of listening to that kind of thing, kind of from the beginning. But as I said earlier, I started listening to their stuff back in September, October, around the time when Danchenko got indicted. And Kleinsmith got convicted and such like that, because finally evidence was being presented in court. And I'm glad I waited, because I understand a lot more, whereas I didn't know who was telling what truthfully at the time.
Right.
So.
Well, I guess that depends on what not means. No,
Right.
If you're Kleinsmith, but it's crazy.
And believe it or not, the way things works is if you've got a dossier that has little bits of truth interspersed within the crap, that makes the crap more believable that there's something there. When in reality, there's nothing there at all, and you've got to disallow everything, because there's no way for a layman to distinguish between what is valuable and what is crap.
Yeah.
And so in a way, it's like if there's no way for us to distinguish between truth and error, it's like, for example, I've been teaching chemistry since 1991. I trust the textbooks I use, that they're in general useful and valuable for how chemistry works. But if I was told 10% of those, 10% of a general chemistry textbook is wrong, that I couldn't use that book, because there'd be no way to differentiate between what is wrong and what is right. When it's not credible. So in some respects,
absolutely,
when you're talking about a science textbook where, there might be little bits and pieces which are wrong, but the big picture can be taught so that everybody can understand it, and it's consistent with what other scientists are saying. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing regarding this material as well. So you can't avoid that kind of relationship.
Yeah, I'm kind of watching and waiting for Durham to go towards Chalupa and the Black Ledger and Nellie Orr, because I always believed that Chalupa and the DNC and their operatives basically got Konstantin Kilmenik to create the false Black Ledger, and then used it and then fed it into the US 702 intel system, and then had Nellie Orr essentially harvest it out of that 702 intel system.
Nellie Orr worked for Fusion GPS,
and the CIA.
Yeah,
as a Russia specialist.
Yeah, so basically the key thing is, I think a lot of that's going to come out of the Danchenko issue, as well as other things. And frankly, I think that what's going to happen is there's going to be a RICO case, the racketeer thing that'll bring everything together. And what Durham is doing now is setting up the foundations for them
with
these different characters, whether it be Danchenko or Sussman or Kleinsmith, the FBI, Danchenko being a civilian, Sussman working for the DNC and the Hillary campaign, essentially all these foundational things for the bigger RICO case, which I still believe is going to happen eventually. But the thing is, what Durham has to do is is set the table appropriately to set the foundation so that when all the indictments start coming, that they'll be believed and taken seriously. So we've only got a few minutes left. So do you have any other
about 5 minutes.
Simple questions for me or something like that we can kind of finish up with?
Gosh.
Anything we didn't talk about?
Well, I said, I believed a couple of years ago, I was trying to put this together and I was trying to figure out the timeline that, because everybody would say Hillary Clinton's never going to go to jail. She's never going to get charged. And I was always saying, yes, she will. I believe that Hillary Clinton will get charged. And I've always believed it's going to be, 2023, 2024, maybe even 2025, before all of this information, all of the indictments and everything kind of cycles through the system to where we actually get indictments against the upper echelon of this conspiracy to take out Trump. And that's how I look at it.
Well, the thing is, the Sussman trial just came out with the latest tidbit that one of the Mook, one of the leaders of the Hillary campaign, essentially exposed the fact that Sussman was essentially told to essentially by Hillary to say yes, present it to the FBI. So that may happen, but I'll believe it when I see it, because I frankly think that Hillary, as well as her husband, essentially have been very good at isolating themselves by getting underlings to do the dirty work, whereas they kind of stayed above the fray. And Hillary got away with an awful lot of things, whether it be Whitewater to all the, losing files, to all sorts of things that was going on regarding Paula Jones and all the other stuff that was going on regarding in Arkansas as well as in Washington, D.C. And so she's gotten very good at avoiding personal responsibility for it. But I'm an optimist, and I believe eventually God will deal with these people that seem to get away with it regarding justice.
They think they get away with it. That's the truth. They think they get away with it. No, you never do. You never do. I know we don't die. I had an experience where I actually was near a house fire, and I can only describe it as I saw two ghostly figures inside my RV, and I could look through them, and I could see the plywood, that old dark fake plywood on behind them. And I only saw them for a split second, and it was like one of those slow motion things that happened to you. And next thing you know, they went zoom into a light that had formed in the other corner of the camper. And I was working on a job up in West Virginia, in Varney, West Virginia. And it was the most profound experience I have ever had in my life. And it changed my life. And so, I've become a Christian now, and I believe in Jesus, and I believe in God, and I know we don't die. And, that's, people will be held accountable.
That's the hope we all have. And frankly, I enjoy watching all these things exposed for what they are. And I think that that's the best we can get out of it. And in the meantime, I encourage your audience to be very skeptical, do the research for themselves, read the documentation that's come out or whatever else before you jump to conclusions. Be intelligent regarding conclusions. Don't necessarily believe everything on the internet. Most of it is crap. And yet use your head and be able to ask questions. And I think that's the best. I think that's where we could best leave it this evening. So
Yeah,
I hope
absolutely.
you've enjoyed this chat as I have, and hope
I
your
have.
listeners have as well.
I have. Thank you very much, Gene, and you have a great day. God bless you.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
everybody.
All right, very
Thanks,
good. All the
everybody.
best.
We're
Okay, bye.
bye-bye. Thanks, everybody. This is Mitch at Revolution Radio. We're wrapping it up now. God bless. Good day and good luck.